Hello and welcome to this paper on the Dybbuk and the Dead Sea, Jewish Gothic and the Watery depths in Sigalit Landau's Salt Bride. Drawing on the concepts of hauntology and the symbolic ecotone, I will be discussing how S. Ansky's depiction of the figure of the Dybbuk can be read via the poetics and aesthetics of incrustation in Landau's hypnotizing photo project, to help render the briny deep a theatre of conductivity and hybridity, a place that speaks of uncanny and meaningful entanglements of self and other, or the human and non-human, resulting in new saltwater modes of being, doing, and knowing. I want to suggest that the Dead Sea, as a mythical, ecological, and historically charged region of exchange, permits not only transition, but also tingling potentiality. I want to begin by keeping us out of the oily, dark water to consider the dramatic environment of the Dead Sea in awful, awesome terms. With salinity at 34%, making it inhospitable to aquatic life, the Dead Sea is almost 10 times as salty as the ocean, its peculiar buoyancy and acoustics lending it an otherworldly quality. Constantly contrary, it's undrinkable water in a desert. The lowest point on Earth, at more than 400 meters below sea level, it's surrounded by high ridged mountains. Bordered by Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan, this unique terrain, fabled to be the biblical site of Sodom and Gomorrah, was chosen by various religious sects, cults, and kings-to-be as a place of hiding, isolation, abstinence, and extraordinary metamorphoses, both personal and social. It's a hallowed landscape and a liminal space. Looming large in the background, however, is the tragedy of the Dead Sea and its fretful shores. In recent decades, the area has suffered accelerated ecological destruction, an outcome, among other things, of the water policies of the country, of the region. And here I'm thinking of the fact that Israel, Jordan, and Syria have been diverting and channeling a considerable portion of the water that would have naturally flowed into the Dead Sea from the diminishing Jordan River. Also, the greed of corporations extracting minerals such as potash and bromine in Israel and Jordan, and political disputes. The consequent ongoing drop of the water level by about a metre every year, posing a threat to regional biodiversity, and the Dead Sea's retreat, combined with the inflow of fresh groundwater that melts the underground salt layer which the sea leaves behind, have turned its surroundings into a landscape that seems to be swallowing itself, as you can see here, which arguably invokes a catastrophic structure of feeling expressed in the eco-Gothic motif of nature's revenge. These huge sinkholes continuously appear, irreversibly perforating the land, destroying beaches and rendering roads inaccessible. The possibility of the Dead Sea's imminent demise leaves us reimagining the future environment as haunted and haunting. But following the interdisciplinary artist Sigalit Landau into the greasy, salt-saturated water, I now want us to experience both the magnificence and the devastation, the fraught, ominous beauty of this endangered site, and examine its potentially transformative power, which Landau extensively utilizes in attempting to entangle us in networks of aesthetic pleasure, responsibility, and environmental concern, opening us up to the non-human in the dream depths. For Landau, the Dead Sea serves both as a laboratory and a medium. Over the past 20 years, she's developed a pioneering practice, turning the organic process of salt crystallization into her artistic technique by immersing mundane, ready-made items such as shoes or fishing nets, as you can see here, and even a violin, into its waters, relying on the Dead Sea to breathe new, mesmerizing life into these objects, which emerge, now preserved, calling attention to how, as Emily Alder notes, the sea demands a radical rethinking of temporality. Inhabiting a death that's not quite death, transgressing categories of obedience, these artworks enter a period of suspended time, creating an agonizing, excessive archaeology of the now. As such, these pieces may be read as engaging with a moment of perpetual healing and suffering, highlighting the fact that salt serves as a pharmacon. It's both remedy and poison, offering blessing and curse simultaneously. This ambivalence, recalling the etymological relation of wonder to wound, entwines the sublime and the abject in what Landau describes as a dynamic, watery womb of little mercy. Landau's 2014 project, Salt Bride, which you can see here, seems to be a continuation of her ritualistic, performative work with the Dead Sea. Created in collaboration with the photographer Jotam From, who had to dive with over 50 kilograms of weights on his body and 4 kilograms on his camera to oppose the natural resistance of the water's high salinity. A traditional Hasidic dress made of a thick fabric, stitched with a net-like weave that the artist stresses the sea would respond to, was suspended in the abyss with the aid of ropes, weights, and scaffolding. Submerged underwater for 3 months, the black dress was coated with layer after layer of salt, crystals, in Landau's words, crawling and creeping onto everything, forging a gradual grip embrace. Its colour has changed, as you can see, from white as it's turned or bewitched into a solid, glimmering bridal gown. 8 photographs were produced, charting this anticipated yet uncontrolled process of crystallization and transformation, and the measurements here are congruent with those of the actual dress. So in these images, the water looks alternately murky and clear, at times like a deep marine vista. A strip of sky glows through it in 2 of the photographs, and at times it seems to be the effect of the cosmic colour scale, which is bold green, brown and yellow hues. The dress appears to float at the centre of the first photograph you can see here, which is frontal and dimmed like an abstract 2-dimensional silhouette. In the arresting 4th photograph, it's already a 3-dimensional pillar of salt. For Landau, there's also an explicit link between the garment's sea-wrought metamorphosis and the practice of photography. In both cases, the quasi-spectral work emerges after a long submersion in liquid. Significantly, the object, the treated ready-made, remains an ethereal presence, absent from the exhibited material. It's encountered merely as a photographic print, as the dress itself was too heavy to lift out of the water, so fragments of it now actually rest beneath the surface of the Dead Sea, eerily hidden. These drowned fragments are amenable to critical approaches that devote themselves to the exploration of lively debris, to the material dynamism of seafloor stuff. As Killian Quigley argues, in the weird and unsettling spaces where art meets and is even made of incrustations, it's possible to detect unusually exciting provocations as unruly objects enact the intertwisting of the natural and the cultural in especially tantalizing and befuddling ways. As Quigley theorizes, an encrusted sense is one that blurs the boundaries between not only life and death, all past and present, but also between artifact, that is, relics of human manipulation of the material world, and ecofact, relics of other than human engagements with matter, climate, weather, and biology, which is witnessed in Landau's piece as a patchwork of salt envelops the dress, camouflaging and merging with its fabric. No longer showing where its surface ends and the sea begins, Quigley notes, the operations of identification, contrast, and perspective that are so fundamental to the proper functioning of some influential sorts of gaze appear to here be under a certain strain. In other words, any separation, let alone priority, between object and ornament is acknowledged as a kind of opportunistic fiction. The gown's form becomes ambiguous. This isn't a question of reduction, erasure, or regress towards nothingness, but a process that can be generative of and articulate a different kind of knowledge. Growing together, the intermingling of substrate and incrustation becomes recognizable as a poetic performance, not as an inclusive clustering of the nondescript. From the intermixture of the object, the specific conditions obtaining in the water, and the actions of organisms, or in this instance crystals, there emerges, quickly emphasizes, a sense of incrustation as an active becoming, or an instance of what Jane Bennett might call a vibrant assemblage. Alienated from authorship, the encrusted dress choreographs an essentially uncertain coalescence and unfolding of human and other than human interest, aesthetics, and interpretation. This structurally messy, strangely alluring sight of monstrous fecundity presents a novel model for interpreting and navigating the Jewish Gothic, not least because Landau's sunken dress is an exact replica of the long-sleeved, close-necked, floor-length one designed by Nathan Altman and worn by the actress Hannah Ravina in the role of Leah in the Habermas Theatre's production of the seminal Yiddish play The Dybbuk, or Between Two Worlds, written by the scholar and folklorist S. Ansky in about 1914, and performed in Hebrew in Moscow in 1922. Arousing a classically Gothic mixture of fear and desire, the legendary Jewish figure of the Dybbuk, and the word derives from the Hebrew for attachment or to cling, was conceived as a kind of demon or incubus, a restless, half-dead, typically male soul that takes refuge or possesses the body of a living being, usually a young woman, in what's often a hostile and uneasy cohabitation. The idea, well established in early Kabbalistic texts, gained traction in the 16th century, and Dybbuk stories could be used to explain socially transgressive or deviant behavior, including what's classed as aberrant sexual urges and perceived madness, with symptoms of possession sometimes including catatonic falls, distortions, crude speech, and aggression. It also offered the hope, however, that the unsettled and unsettling spirit could be exorcised from both the highly permeable body and the body politic. A liminal, uncanny, compelling creature signaling the dangers of uncertainty, disrupting all topological laws of inside and outside. The Dybbuk, as Naomi Sedman has observed, is an overdetermined figure. Indeed, it is a figure for overdetermination and ambivalence, mediating between life and death, male and female, the transcendent and the deformed, victimization and empowerment. The most influential version of the Dybbuk tale was conceived by Ansky. His play, written and reworked between 1912 and 1917 in both Russian and Yiddish, drew upon the stories, rituals, superstitions, and Hasidic folklore that the playwright discovered during his 1912 to 14 series of ethnographic expeditions to Jewish shtetls in Eastern Europe, which created a romantic drama with mythic resonance. Yet while Ansky's play is rooted in traditional Dybbuk stories, the scenario that he depicted was unprecedented. The Dybbuk is the true love of his victim, and the possession is ultimately a consensual, welcome union. In Ansky's complex and meticulously crafted tragedy, a poor rabbinic student named Hanan dies upon discovering that his beloved, Leah, has been betrothed to another man, only for his spirit to return and possess her as a Dybbuk. The play's action culminates in a dramatic exorcism, and though the community's rabbi succeeds in expelling the Dybbuk from Leah's body, the two young lovers come together again in a passionate Liebestod, achieving unification beyond bodily and earthly restrictions. A number of critical approaches to the play have been keen to emphasize that what functions on one level as a male possession of a female body can simultaneously be understood as Leah's protest, her refusal to serve as an object of exchange within the masculine economy. As Irene Einert-Cofino argues, the young woman's covert rebellion is an act of sedition against higher patriarchal authorities, familial and religious, a stratagem to escape a forced marriage. This emphasis on subversion is echoed in Ira Konigsberg's analysis of the play, which encourages a psychoanalytic exploration of desire as an impulse for fusion. Leah and Hannah, she maintains, are two parts of a single whole seeking to come together, the journey reflecting an innate human impulse toward a loss of the individual and isolated self. Searching for the jouissance of undifferentiated oneness through the Dybbuk, they repudiate the restrictions of imposed identity, erode distinctions and boundaries, and subvert via ecstatic merging the rigid structuring that characterizes the paternal regime of laws. To probe deeper, though, into this subversive dynamic of the lover's fantastical fusion, or what Freud might describe fittingly here is the oceanic feeling, and the play's subtitle, Between Two Worlds, requires recognition of how the elements of the human and the non-human, and the natural and the supernatural, are all played out in Sigalit Landau's Salt Bride, which is a meeting or even a trysting ground, elucidating an intimate brush with the horrifically sublime, to draw on Rebecca Solnit and Sarah Rich here, shifts us towards a series of relations that embrace instability, disorder, and disorientation, veering between terror and enchantment, and transformed by the sea's alchemy. Salt Bride offers a way of reading the Dybbuk as excess within the depths, privileging a briny multi-dimensionality, to borrow Hester Bloom's term. An example of what Jimmy Packham has called a symbolic or an ontological ecotone, a hybrid porous zone where the human body becomes a site of the overlapping of various states of being. So the salt crystal brideground denotes the coming together or co-emergence of the self and other in a realm of dark flux. This anxiety-inducing region, then, is a border space of encounter and exchange, a place for chaotic collapsings of difference and annihilative change, giving rise to a sense both of Gothic horror and agency that constantly reminds us of the processes of objection which attend our dealings with the deep. Establishing the correspondence between objection, as described by Julia Christopher, and the abhuman's exuberant morphic possibilities, Kelly Hurley emphasizes the trauma and exhilaration of monstrous becoming. From this position, Sigalit Landau's Salt Bride comes with connotations of a strangely liberatory strategy, one that viciously enjoys and celebrates the perverse and playful plurality that comes with crossing and destabilizing boundaries between human and other. Edged with the sublime, Salt Bride stages the spectacle of the unfixed subject, the not quite human metamorphic body, co-opting the sea to make visible the obscene, perilous proximity of the self to the abyssal reality of the more than human. This emphasis on liminal edges, on being enmeshed or spectrally dissolved in ambiguous, transitional, underwater spaces and fabrics, makes Jacques Derrida's concept of hauntology a particular relevance here. As Colin Davis explains, a hauntological position is one of deliberate indeterminacy, replacing the priority of being and presence with the figure of the ghost as that which is neither present nor absent, neither dead nor alive. Sigalit Landau's Salt Bride arguably takes its cue from Derrida's idea of being with the other, with the spectre, as a way towards reimagining prevailing relations and living otherwise. In this ethical endeavour concerned with acceptance, the salt-rich spectre of the Dybbuk functions as a conduit precisely because it's a threshold figure. As a ghost, it is, as Laura White asserts in her work on ecospectrality, both revenant that returns the past to attention and a revent that announces possible futures. This formulation of haunting encourages attentive listening out for and to the spectral voice. The book is, in fact, a monster of language. It manifests as an uncontrollable torrent of language emanating from the possessed. This unruly, hybrid, excessive, ventriloquial voice, a marker of what Matt Foley terms vococentric Gothic, is also, however, an agent of transformation. Its various demands to be listened to challenge and unpick superficial distinctions between self and other. The provocative and problematic waters of the Dead Sea actively mediate this encounter between the supernatural and the natural, fostering an uncanny recognition and mobilizing the productive potentialities of haunting to create Saltbride's revelatory sound world. Suspended in the briny waters and navigating ecological grief, Landau's Saltbride is fragile, terrible, and breathtakingly beautiful. As this paper has hopefully shown, in yielding to the encrusting sea, the garment's multifarious liveliness invokes both a disturbing and promising vision of risky attachments, answering to some deep, irrational, and impossible desire within us. From glistening salt crystals and the poetics of drowned enrichment to Ansky's Dybbuk, a modernist myth pulsing with energy and dreadful pleasure, we're left with a peculiar kind of terror that opens us up to and implicates us in the non-human. Entangled with troubling apparitions and watery worlds where the boundaries that separate the living and the dead, self and other, all dissolve, we're presented with a vertiginous moment of opportunity to be transformed by alterity. The Dead Sea truly is alive with possibility. Thank you. I welcome any comments that you might have, and I sincerely hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.